Noble Belgique, ô mère chérie, à toi nos cœurs, à toi nos bras, à toi notre sang, ô patrie, nous le jurons tous, tu vivras toujours grande et belle, et ton invincible unité.
So talking about oneself is of course always very pleasant. I come from a family of landowners in the countryside, but my father was a diplomat already, and it happens that his two sons wanted to be diplomats too. It's not that easy because it's a concours. It's a proof where everybody stands at the same level in Belgium. But somehow we both made it, and so we are both diplomats, my brother and myself. I was born in Leuven, near Brussels, in 1967. It's a nice little city in the outskirts of Brussels. Education was not so classic because my father was a diplomat, so I had my education in the French lycée in Geneva, in Madrid, in Casablanca, and then finally in Brussels. And I studied in Brussels because it's very important for kids of diplomats to study in their own country, otherwise they lose the roots that they have. So I studied business administration in Belgium, and I did a specialization in European matters in the very nice little city of Bruges in Belgium. Well, I read a lot. I've always read a lot. I read a lot and I read everything. Besides the sometimes a bit annoying, boring reports of my colleagues, I read non-fictional books, journalism, history books of course, books about biographies about people, and of course lots of novels. Diplomats, as you can expect, do a lot of social activities, so I meet a lot of people.
D'abord, il y a l'aîné, lui qui est comme un melon.
We diplomats, of course, have to have two networks of friends, the one in Belgium and the one in post. So I have a lot of friends in Belgium whom I meet as regularly as I can, and of course plenty of people in Egypt, but this is very easy because Egyptians are very welcoming people, so we get invited, and it's very nice to be present in Egypt.
بقاهرة بعيد الملك والذي أقيم بمنزل سفير بلجيكا بالقاهرة.
لقائنا هيكون مع سعادة سفير دولة بلجيكا السيد فرانسوا. Welcome to our program, Excellency.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you in the Belgian Genina.
Belgian Genina. Today it's Independent Day. It's the National Day of Belgium, and we celebrate this event today. Also, we have another very important event about the book with the visits of the royal family, and it's published through the Biblioteca Alexandrina.
Exactly. It's a book that has been done by a collective of Belgian writers and magnificently illustrated with some of the illustration you see here around. And yes, it has been edited by the Biblioteca Alexandrina. So it's a great pleasure to have them all today, and it tells the story about the story of the Belgian presence in Egypt since Muhammad Ali.
Well, the people, basically. A difficulty about the post, a nice thing about the post is the people. And in Egypt they are very welcoming. They take ambassadors very seriously as really the representative of one's country. And this is of course very pleasant. In Belgium, it's not the case. I mean, when you see a diplomat, he's just a middle-ranking civil servant. In Egypt, no. Diplomats are the embodiment of their country, and this is, of course, extremely pleasant. What I like in Egypt, Cairo, I love Cairo. I came here 30 years ago, I loved it, and 30 years after I come again, this time with a driver and a car, a big car, and it's a city to play with. It's a city that's enjoyable. I mean, people is nice, you can stop and buy a kebab, it's just, you don't feel threatened, you feel welcome in Cairo. So I love the city very much. Yes, of course, diplomats have plenty of opportunities to mingle with arts. But the Egyptian writers, of course, I wrote what's there to read in French, Robert Solé, for example, Aswani, for example. I read also, of course, Naguib Mahfouz. And there are a few ones which I would like to read, but which I cannot find in the bookshops, but which are not translated. So, of course, I read a lot about Egypt, also non-fictional books, Tariq Osman, for example, about the situation in Egypt, political situation. Of course, I have to read a lot.
Délicieuse depuis son arrivée en Égypte comme ambassadeur de Belgique en Égypte, et on espère qu'il y aura des moments de rencontres beaucoup plus au cours de votre séjour, avec vraiment des relations étroites, tant comme elle était toujours entre la Belgique et l'Égypte. Et si on commence, Votre Excellence, avec les consultations entre les deux côtés, entre Bruxelles et le Caire, concernant les dossiers d'ordre commun, concernant les relations bilatérales sur le niveau politique et concernant les dossiers régionaux. Qu'est-ce qu'on peut dire?
Alors, la Belgique et l'Égypte sont deux pays amis. Donc il y a des consultations, je dirais, régulières. Il y a eu très récemment une visite ministérielle. Il y a une visite également, il y a une rencontre du Premier ministre et du Président de la République en marge de l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies, il y a quelques mois de cela. Les contacts au niveau des administrations sont très fréquents. Donc je dirais que nous nous tenons informés de nos positions réciproques sur tous les sujets d'actualité.
Aura pour devise immortelle le roi, la loi, la liberté. Aura pour devise immortelle.
I always wanted to be a diplomat. In my class, I always wanted to be the class delegate. And then when I had to find a job, I became a lobbyist, because I represented the cement industry, the interest of the cement industry. But then, of course, whenever I could pass the exam, and there was an exam, of course, I wrote myself in, because there's no better destiny than represents one country, of course. And from the first moment, from the first day I entered the diplomatic career, I felt myself totally at home. We have done challenging, with my wife, we have done challenging postings. We have been to Iran as a first posting. We have also been to Burundi as an ambassador, which is also quite challenging. But basically my specialty is very classical for Belgian diplomats, and it's Central Africa and Europe. In the European matters, I'm probably the specialist for European security, foreign policy and defense. I was ambassador to the European Union on this topic, and I have covered every position in the foreign ministry around this issue. On Africa, I've been Africa director and ambassador to Burundi, so this is basically my two tracks. And then, of course, with Iran and Egypt now, I have also a Middle East experience. And in my youth, I lived 4 years in Morocco with my parents. So it's a very classical career, I would say. I think being an ambassador in Burundi was extremely interesting. We have links with Burundi because it was a UN mandate, so as a colony at the time, and there are still strong links pertaining with Burundi. So there, you had an important political role to play. My favorite posting in the whole career is probably this one. It's probably Cairo. Because it's so interesting, because you can actually talk to people, because it's a very open, very welcoming society, and it's because it's a beating heart of the Middle East. So that's probably my golden years. First posting was in '96. In '96, it was in Iran. I was very fresh stagiaire diplomat. I entered the career I'm married in February. I entered the career in March, and I dragged my poor wife veiled in Tehran 4 months afterwards. So that was the first, and then 2 months afterwards my ambassador was recalled because of political crisis, so I stayed chargé d'affaires for 1 year as a stagiaire diplomat. That was quite rock and roll, I would say, but fun. Well, for a Belgian diplomat, the Belgian interest lies in Europe. It doesn't seem very sexy, but the balances between the different countries of Europe, the influences between East, Central, Western Europe, the power struggle within the European institution, that's where Belgian national interests lie. So we don't make war and peace. We pitch the presence of Belgium very finely within Europe, and we exert as much influence as we can in order to keep borders open and the European system strong. This is the national interest of Belgium. It is the maintaining of a strong, wealthy and democratic Europe. On a lesser scale, we have Central Africa, which is dear to Belgian hearts, where we have very little trade and very little kind of national interest, but is very dear to Belgian heart, and where we have knowledge, because we have still people living there, we know the place, and so every Belgian diplomat should go at some point in one of the African countries. We've got a big air network there with our national carrier airline. We've got a very interesting diplomatic network all around Central Africa, which is probably one of the best in the world, I would say. So that's the second element of importance. And then this trade. With China, with Japan, with America, and for this the diplomatic network is of course very, very busy. Middle East, I would say, is somebody everybody cares for, of course, and so we have to study and to keep busy, but we are not a prime player in the neighborhood. Well, diplomats have to, first thing, it's a very easy job if you understand that you embody your country, that you represent your country, which means your whole life is basically being the representative of your country. For those who don't like it, it very soon becomes heavy and terrible and difficult. If you like it, you love it. You've got to show empathy. I mean, the person in front of you comes from a different background. You should never lie. Never lie. A diplomat, contrary to what people think, a good diplomat never lies. But he says to the other person the thing that his background can understand. So you have to communicate. You have to culturally love the people that's in front of you. and tell him what he may understand and what is useful for your both country to understand. So that's a very special quality you have to have: empathy, and of course the understanding that you're not speaking for yourself, you're speaking for your country, and it has to be really inside you. Belgium strongly supports the EU objective to reach climate neutrality by 2050 and at least 55% reduction of greenhouse gas by 2030. For Belgium, those goals pose particular challenges. We are the energy and petrochemical hub of Northern Europe. We are strongly committed to feed the petrochemical industry with green energy, and we are therefore developing fast Antwerp as a green hydrogen hub thanks to our network of pipelines irradiating in Europe. Gives me a shot. When I used to lift my panel in multilateral fora and ask for the floor, I would feel thrilled. I will speak for my country. I really loved it, and it's it's an everyday satisfaction for me. I must say, it's real. I'm a happy person. I'm a happy person because I'm a happy diplomat, because I like representing my country. As a diplomat, I represent, of course, the views of my minister. So I have to keep in touch with what he says, what he thinks, the main line of Belgian politics, and so that's my political vision. I don't have my own political vision, but your question is a bit different. Your question is about, do I have ideas on the way how diplomats should work? I think we are not very bright people, but we are moving in a flock. I am constantly in touch with my colleagues, with my Belgian colleagues, my cabinet. We really move as a system. I could see this in the European Union system. You've got different diplomacy that you see. The good diplomacies are the ones that are the closest integrated. It's no use to have brilliant diplomats. It's sometimes useful, but the good diplomacy is the one where the small guy sitting in the working group says exactly the same that the minister sitting at the council. And his country is influenced if people realize that what the expert says at level 0 is exactly the same as the minister will say at the top level. And for this, we have to be very well coordinated. That's, I think, the strength of a good diplomacy. We are very much in soft power because our army is, as you can imagine, small and innocuous. But so we have to be well tuned in the NATO, because our security depends from our friends. We are only contributing to NATO. And we have to be well tuned with everything in Europe, I would say. Soft power we do have a little bit in Africa. We don't have much in the Middle East because we are a Northern European country. We don't have much soft power in this region. But for example, in Egypt, we are probably seen as a modern, friendly, and innocuous country. I mean, we are not a colonial power for Egypt. We are kind of nice guys. What our contribution to Egypt, that was industry, that was trade, nothing political. So that's our soft power in Egypt. Soft power in Egypt is Baron Empin, is building cities, connections. That's our soft power. You are a happy diplomat if you love representing. You are on stage. I mean, when you are in bed, you are on stage. You are basically representing your country. It comes, of course, with an immense dignity. It's a very dignified job. For example, here in Egypt, I don't have much intellectual work to do. It's not like in my former job when I should read, understand dossier very quickly and then defend them. No, here it's a bit different. I have to embody my country and do it seriously. And so, by chance, I love it.